Good morning, everyone. And thank you for taking the time to join us for this session. I am Anthony Hannon. I'm representing MassMutual. And today I have the honor of facilitating a conversation with my esteemed colleagues about the importance of diversity, equity, and inclusion in the workplace. Now, in the spirit of history being made this week, with the first Black woman, Ketanji Brown Jackson, being confirmed to the U.S. Supreme Court, I wanted to start off with a quote from the late Ruth Bader Ginsburg to set the table for the discussion we're going to have today. "We will all profit from a more diverse, inclusive society, understanding, accommodating, even celebrating our differences, while pulling together for the common good." Again, that was Ruth Bader Ginsburg. So with that, let's get started. Let's jump into introductions. We'll start with Talisha Ming White. Please tell us a little bit more about yourself, how you got into diversity, equity, inclusion space, and why diversity, equity, inclusion is important for the workplace.
Absolutely. And thank you, Anthony, for having us today. Thank you to the Cyber Future Foundation as well for having us. As Anthony said, I am Talisha Ming White. I work for Regions Bank, and I'm a 16-year professional there at this organization. My background has been primarily in diversity, equity, and inclusion. When I think about the importance of really equity, diversity, and inclusion, it's really just makes us better as organizations when we take an intentional effort to look at the work that we're doing through a lens of equity, so that we are removing barriers for access, participation. That also has an impact on just our feeling in the space of work. And so it just makes us better performers. And so that's what I would have to say about the importance of equity, diversity, and inclusion in the workplace.
Thank you very much. Shamaya?
Thank you for having me, Anthony. My name is Shamaya Lodge, and I'm actually Anthony's colleague at MassMutual. So happy to be here on this panel with him today. And so for me, I am been with MassMutual for a little over 16 years, held various positions within the organization. Background is in human resources. And when I became a leader at MassMutual, I really started to research really what it meant to work in and have an inclusive work environment for the employees that I was going to be leading. And so I started to get more involved in our company's business resource groups. And for me, what I typically see and understand, and piggybacking on a lot of points Talisha, has made, you're gonna have to edit that out, I'm sorry. Piggybacking on a lot of points Talisha has made is DE&I is really important because employees should feel safe, seen, and heard when they come to the workplace. Having a solid DE&I program will ensure that.
And James.
Well, Anthony, again, thanks so much for having me. My name is James Stanley, and I am an HR business partner at the Hartford Insurance Financial Services Group. I've been with the Hartford since 2002, and currently I have the role of a fellow at CEO Action for Racial Equity, representing the Hartford, and sort of thrilled to be a part of this. For me, when you really talk about DEI, and the value, the importance in the workplace specifically, there are numerous things that come to mind. And I echo the sentiments of both Talisha as well as Shamaya. One thing that I would add to those sentiments is DEI should provide an opportunity in the workplace to be more reflective of society, very diverse representation in society. When you truly talk about this aspect of inclusive work environments, we know that the more diverse and inclusive a work environment is, the more innovative, the better decisions, the better outcomes to impact whatever the business objectives are. And last but not least, as organizations and workforces have continued to place emphasis more recently on equity, as you drive more equity throughout the work environment, then you have the opportunity for your employee base to actually drive this sense of belonging, feel as though they can be themselves and bring the true impact and value that they have into the organization, thus unlocking the true capabilities of DEI. Thank you.
Thank you all very much. And I'm going to pull along on that thread there, James, with the innovation, right, and the innovative ways to implement DE&I work. We know that DE&I work has been going on for quite some time now, but there's this heightened focus on diversity, equity, and inclusion within the workplace. What are some of successful ways, or even some pitfalls and failures, mistakes made that you've seen either at your current company or previous companies where we're trying to implement diversity, equity, inclusion that worked really well, or it may not have? We'll start with Shamaya.
Thank you for the question, Anthony. And I'll actually start with some of the pitfalls, or a pitfall that I have. Just being in this industry, you kind of hear from other colleagues in this space. And so one of the biggest pitfalls to avoid actually would be classifying diversity, equity, and inclusion together. And what I mean by that is assuming diversity, equity, and inclusion are all the same is simply incorrect, right? So for example, hiring for diversity does not automatically create an inclusive culture. If an organization increases its diverse workforce without considering the culture and working environment, it will actually fail at inclusion, just simply put. So that's just one of the pitfalls that I kind of continuously hear just from my colleagues in the industry. But to actually counter that, success in this space is when companies align their DE&I efforts with their organizational goals. And we have done that successfully at our organization, as you know. Setting goals and standards is key to ensuring companies are walking the talk when it comes to creating an environment that is actually rooted in transparency and trust, where every employee feels like they belong. And we have done that successfully at our organization.
Talisha?
Yeah, just to, double down on some of the points that Shamaya made, where I've seen success with diversity, equity, and inclusion is those organizations that are transparent about their journey, their ability to be vulnerable about where they are, recognizing where they have opportunities, what they're doing well. I would say, when you think about success for DE&I, it's having those honest conversations about what is the culture of our organization? What do we highlight? What do we reward? What do we celebrate? Because that impacts diversity, equity, and inclusion and employees' sense of belonging and what they value within our organization. And so those organizations that I've seen be successful in this journey, they have honest conversations. They're transparent about where they are, where they want to go. As Shamaya said, they're very strategic in the process. And so when I think about the pitfalls, for organizations that keep DE&I programmatic, it's not sustainable, right? It's DE&I is this thing over to the side. It should really be baked into the fabric of who you are as an organization. And so it's more than just, monthly celebrations or article here or there. It's about how are you looking at your processes and procedures, the way in which you onboard associates, the way in which you promote engagement with your employees. And so again, just making sure you don't keep it just something that's programmatic, but you're very intentional, very thoughtful and strategic about the implementation of the work you're trying to accomplish.
James.
Thanks for the question. And I definitely want to build on the thread that Talisha was sort of just describing. I strongly echo the sentiments of one of the pitfalls is creating and attempting to sustain DEI as a program. Huge pitfall. Enculturating it into your organization. It has to become a part of your value set, a part of the way in which you function and do business, and deeply enculturated in your organization. It has to be supported top down, led bottom up, and integrated into the fabric of all you do. That's where you create and unleash the power of a diverse, equitable, and inclusive culture. So not a program. Another huge pitfall that I've seen, attempting to integrate it in your culture by creating a compliance-oriented mindset. Here's what we need to do. We check the box, not really aligned with the value set and the true sentiment across the organization is a huge pitfall to avoid. You can't mandate DEI. It can't be effective in a compliance-oriented check the box method. Enculturating it into all that you do and living into it is what I've seen most successful.
That's great.
Can
Thank you
I
all.
just jump
Yes,
in?
please.
Because I love what James said about you can't mandate it, because what you're talking about a lot of times in DE&I is a shift in perspective and behaviors. And it's hard to mandate that. So I appreciate James calling out that this is something you can't mandate. There are processes and procedures you can put into place. But again, we're talking about a lot of times the shift in behaviors, the shift in mindset of pushing against status quo of how we've traditionally done things. And so again, I just appreciate James calling that out.
Right. And just to double click on everything everyone just said, we really have to start to create a culture where individuals want to show up for this work. All people, not just the impacted parties, but everyone. And we often hear allies, and allies say, how can I get more involved? It's to continue to help to create that culture where everybody feels like they belong, including the allies. We don't want to do this so hard where the allies are now pushed out, and now it's just one of those things that it requires all hands on deck. Everyone has to see themselves included in this work.
Your whole self to work is for everybody, right? Like you said, it's not just for the impacted parties. And in all of your responses, I heard, strategy, accountability, building that culture, setting that culture from top down, and then leading from the bottom up, James, as you mentioned before. McKinsey, a consulting firm, they've done a series of diversity, equity, inclusion reports. The latest is on diversity wins. And a key factor in their research and studies is that leadership accountability drives the success of diversity, equity, inclusion implementation. Pulling along the threads that we all just mentioned in the last question, what are some ways that you've seen leadership held accountable for building that culture and not just being compliance driven or checking the box, if you will? How have you seen successful implementation of culture and implementation of diversity, equity, and inclusion within the workplace? James, we'll start with you.
Sure. Again, thanks so much for the question again, Anthony. So as I described, right, it cannot be a compliance-oriented thing or check the box thing. However, you still have to intentfully and focused efforts to drive accountability. So in most, if not all, of our key business mechanisms, we have measurable, tangible results. So driving accountability through metrics, through actions, through outcomes are equally as important in the DEI lens as any other key business metric or key performance indicator. So what I've seen successful at my company and several other companies that I'm aware of is this aspect of holding leaders accountable for their talent decisions and linking many of those aspects directly to compensation. It's one of the things that we do at the Hartford. We also have specific dedicated DEI unit plans across 16 largest business and functional parts of our organization, and review them on a quarterly basis and drive that degree of accountability still tied to compensation. So those are methods that I've seen become successful. I think that there's still an opportunity to deeply enculturate that within organizations because these are relatively new processes, but that's a way in which I've seen successful to date.
Talisha?
Yes, in total agreement with everything that James just said. And one of the ways that I've seen us be successful in measuring DE&I and accountability is through engagement surveys, right? Engagement surveys tell the story of what's going on in your organization. And so you can really drill down, there's proven science around certain questions that will give you a true picture of what it is to experience your organization. what that sense of belonging, what your values are, your thoughts and attitudes around diversity, equity, and inclusion. And so, through those engagement surveys, leaders can take those scores back and sit with themselves and say, okay, again, what are we doing that's working well? But then there are some clear areas of opportunities, and then have conversations with your employees about what do we need to do to shift the culture, right? Again, as James said, it's not just a one person led thing. We all own diversity, equity, and inclusion, and we should all be a part of the conversation. And we should all, quite honestly, be held accountable for that, right? Obviously, there will be different levels of accountability, but I think, when you leverage, things such as engagement surveys, or some people may call them employment satisfaction surveys, that really helps to tell the story of what your company is doing well, where there are opportunities, and then you can work collectively as a team to, take those results and really bake them into your goals and strategy as a department, as an organization overall.
They pretty much covered everything. So want to double click on one point and kind of string it through is many companies in this space. Again, they walk the talk by obviously having, from an overall performance perspective, this as a strategic mandate. It's non-negotiable. It is tied to their compensation. Every level of the organization is leaning into this conversation. One point that I want to actually make mention is that leaders at the ground level have to foster an environment. They can't just bring in diverse talent, but they have to actually promote and recruit within, right? So what are they doing with the talent when they actually get there? And so that's tied to overall performance goals as well. They covered everything.
Yeah, I just want to double click on, and you all mentioned it in some way, shape, or form, this question and previous questions, but being vulnerable, right? And being transparent with where you are at as a company and as a team, as a leadership group as well, on your diversity, equity, inclusion journey, because that's going to drive change, right? If only a select group of people sees the metrics and really knows what's going on, well, the accountability really falls with that group of people. They can't do it alone, right? Like James said, you got to lead from the bottom up, but hold leaders accountable as well. Damon, yes, please.
If I could just make one quick comment on that. So I have this personal saying, and I position this across my organization. It's one of my calling cards. And my comment is transparency is the path to truth. Transparency in and of itself may or may not be truth, but it can lead you down the path. So the more transparent organizations become, you can rest assured that you're on the path to truth. And truth is essential in building trust and creating diverse, equitable, and inclusive organizations. So transparency is the path to truth.
Mm-hmm. And I love that, James, too. And also thinking about, Anthony talking about vulnerability. Vulnerability is a strength, right?
Yes, absolutely.
What it does, it helps to foster relationships. And it's okay to be honest about, we don't know what we don't know. And this is a journey. And you should pace yourself through this process. Don't try to do all things at once, right? Again, it is a journey. It didn't take us overnight to get to where we are in a lot of our organizations or to shape and build our culture. So if there are some things that you're trying to shift or evolve, a lot of that change may not happen overnight as well. And so you have to be patient, being vulnerable and saying, we made a misstep here. And so we're going to pivot or adjust so that we can be sustainable in what it is that we're trying to accomplish. And so I just really appreciate the calling out of transparency and vulnerability as strengths within an organization when you think about advancing diversity, equity, and inclusion.
And to that point, Talisha, also, this is hard work. And it's so important that companies do not give up before they start. It is so important because, again, right, like just like we have success in all of our business initiatives that we put forth, we have to start to think about these efforts as such. And so I just want to double click on the point you made. It is so important to lean into our pitfalls, lean into the opportunities to scrape our knees and get up and try it again. This is hard work. You will not accomplish this in one day, period.
Absolutely. I really love these themes that we're pulling out of this conversation. And along that theme of D&I being a journey, this is like we said earlier, this work has been going on for a while. I think early on, I think it's fair to say that companies probably saw this as like a side project, right? Like we're going to do it because our employees are asking for it, but it's not really driving the business, the bottom line. But numerous studies and research have been done that it actually does drive the bottom line. It increases efficiency, increases profits. Diverse companies succeed. That has been proven out. But there's still challenges, right? We are still on that journey to get to where we want to be and go even further. So what keeps you optimistic about this work and keeps you invested in this work and gets you excited each and every day to continue this work? Talisha.
I love this question, right? And I love that Shamaya talked about how hard this work is. And I, in the spirit of vulnerability, I have had days where I'm like, do I want to continue this work? Because it is hard. It is emotionally taxing. I will say that anybody that goes on this journey and continues this journey of DE&I, self-care is important in the process. Realize when you need to kind of step away and regroup and ground yourself and to remind yourself while you're doing the work. For me, this work is a very personal journey. If you were to ask my mom, she would probably say I've been a DE&I professional my whole life because I just naturally look at things to say, where can we be better? What can we do differently here? And yes, this may have been the way that we've always done things, but is it the right thing to do? And so what keeps me coming back to the work is the progress that I have seen. My company is not the same company when I joined 16 years ago. The types of conversations that we're having now, we weren't having years ago. And to be able to see the evolution of that, it gives me hope. Even, as a Black American, the changes that happened during the civil rights movement, what if they had stopped because the work was hard? Where would we be? And so I think about that. I think about my own grandmother and the tenacity and effort that she put forward to bring about change in her community. And I want to continue to build on the legacy of that. Yes, it is hard. There are days that I get tired. There are days that I wonder, how much more can we do or what else do we need to do? But then I stop and think about the work that has been done, the progress that has been made. And then I look in the face of my children and I say, we still got work to do and I'm going to continue to do the work.
Okay. Same question, Shamaya. What keeps you motivated for the work and optimistic?
Yeah, so honestly, diversity, equity, and inclusion is much more easier to talk about than it is to achieve, quite frankly, if I'm being honest, and having a vulnerable moment with all of you. The inability to understand and tolerate those that are different from ourselves run deep across the human history, period. It's because of those reasons I get up each and every day and I do this work. There's so much work to do. And to Talisha's point, there's so much that has already happened in this space and we can't give up now because there are days where it's absolutely hard and we're kind of like, you can't be serious. This can't be still the reality to this day. When we think about the work all of us are doing in this equity space, my gosh, do I wake up each and every day and say, this is not real life. This has not happened this has not been the reality for all of us for so many years. And it's because of that, it pushes me to continue to do this work. It is hard. And I know I continue to say that because that's just the reality. But it's so rewarding when you start to see the success happening in this space and just the differences and individuals who have never talked about race in the workplace are picking up their phones and saying, how are you doing? How's it going? What have you all accomplished for Black people? How can I help? It's so rewarding. I get chills even thinking about it, talking about it, but it's because of that I continue to push on. I'm a mother of 4 little girls. It's important that I assist in creating a future for them that is totally different than what we're living in today. And it's because of those reasons I do this work.
James, close this out, sir.
So I'll describe it in 2 buckets. one of which Talisha referenced, and it is this view of progress. Although slow, although difficult, progress nonetheless. Second, it is an overwhelming sense of responsibility. So if not me, then who? If not now, then when? So it's me, it's now, and to continue the progress, whatever it takes. That's, I think, what is so important in sustaining an effort like this. It's my turn. It will be someone else's turn. It's not only my turn exclusively. Clearly, I have others running this race with me, but I have to run. And I would love for others to continue to join me. So if not me, then who? If not now, then when?
Thank you for that. Before we close, any final thoughts from any of you? I'd really appreciate this time, and I know our audience will too.
One last thing I just want to make sure we mention is, again, organizations shouldn't go in this alone. They have to get every member of the organization involved and on this journey. I talked about how hard it is, but I want to also talk about it's very important to celebrate the small wins. Celebrate when your team reads an article together and you all debrief it. That's a win, right? Celebrate when, you all just recruited X% of talent that looks different than other folks and projects are getting executed on. That's a win. So continue to celebrate those small wins. We will start to see the progress Talisha and James talked about.
I will also say too, is that now because there are more conversations about diversity, equity, and inclusion, there are a vast number of resources, right? 20, 30 years ago, you didn't have examples, you didn't have all of these resources, you didn't have metrics. So you don't have to recreate the wheel in a lot of things. Look at what other people are doing and say, how could that work for my organization? What pieces, could we pull in? What are we already doing? How could we integrate, what some things are already happening? And so I would say really lean into resources. LinkedIn is your best friend. Create you a network of professionals in this space. Again, because you don't know what you don't know. We are forever students of diversity, equity, and inclusion because we are complex as humans. And so there are a lot of things that we're just not going to know. And when you think about the intersectionality of people, surround yourself, create a vast network so that you can continue to learn. And also Google is your best friend. So again, if it's something that you don't know, just type it in Google and now vet your sources. But it's just, again, there's just a vast amount of resources and access to people, tools, and measuring capabilities for this work.
For me, one closing thought I'd like to leave people with is a question that I get still very frequently to this day, and it's individual. And people often ask, like, what can I do? There's three conceptual things that I attempt to leave with people. Everyone can do these things. Number one, look inside out first. This is not external, this is internal about you. Look inside yourself and understand, learn, educate yourself, do all of those self-care things first. Second, you heard this concept of see something, say something. I've modified that to say show what you know. So as you learn, as you become more aware, you cannot now keep it exclusively for you. So you have to show what you know. And that's a part of this view of transparency is the path to truth by showing what you actually know. And then last but not least, you have to walk the talk and do what you say you're going to do. So commit to something, whatever it is. Make a simple commitment to something and then do it. Those are lessons that I think that everyone can take with them and something that each individual can actively do to help on this journey and make progress.
Chills, James. Seriously, I love that. I'm glad we're able to close, some takeaways for the audience. I want to thank the three of you, our panelists, for joining. I always learn so much from all my other fellows, my fellow fellows in the CEO Action for Racial Equity Fellowship. Y'all are experts in this field. You have lived experiences, both personally and professionally. So I always learn so much when I talk with y'all and talk with other fellows, and I know the audience will have a lot of takeaways and a lot of learnings from the three of you too. I want to thank Cyber Future Foundation for giving us this platform to talk about diversity, equity, inclusion. It is a journey. Companies, different organizations, government entities are on different parts, different areas of that journey, but we're going to continue to do the work, and hopefully this panel help you along your journey. Cyber Future Foundation, I will make sure that McKinsey report, reference, and other resources are available as part of this discussion too. I'm going to volunteer the panelists too that they are available for any questions, reach outs afterwards as well, just as I am. But I just want to thank our panelists again. Thanks Cyber Future Foundation again, and thank you all for listening and watching. And please let us know how we can help.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.